What's up, everybody? We are live. Good morning. Happy Saturday. Welcome to Coast College Football pregame show, episode number 16. I'm your host, Uncle Shally, Bill Shacross. To my top left, as always, we're getting right into it today. We're not even wasting time. My Buckeye brother from another mother, Mr. Cottrell Simpson. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm feeling pretty good. Another layup week before the next two big ones. So feeling good. Get to keep the stress levels down today. So feeling good.
Good to hear, sir. Good to hear. Two big ones. And as always, last but certainly not least, maybe not number one in our hearts, but number one in the polls. Mr. Black Alex Elmore, Mr. West Coast, Mr. Oregon Duck himself. How are you, sir?
I will take the hate, Bill. I will take the hate because I will take that number one spot right next to our name, baby. But no, I'm happy to be here on this beautiful Saturday morning. Last week was a great week for me. Like I said, SMU is in first place in the ACC, rolling right now, and we know honestly in control of the rest of their fate. We got Oregon on a roll. Ole Miss took care of business last week. I know we're getting a preview soon. I don't want to give away too much, but it was a great week last week, and I'm excited to talk about it. And I know we're getting into a lot of stuff today about college football playoff predictions and where standings are, and it's going to be a great week, and I'm excited to talk about it with you guys.
Those Oregon Cowboys are starting to get a little out of control. Like I can't wait for a few weeks to go by, and we get to bring those guys back down there.
Hold on a second, Cottrell. You always say to us, "You guys have never won a national championship." That means that we are excited because we are having success for an unsuccessful program, like as you say we are.
You guys always have success this time of year. Like this is
you
like
said that we're nobodies. Remember, you said that
this is your Christmas. Like this is your time of year where you get to be excited and talk a lot. But then the weather starts to get cold in most of the country, and then reality starts to settle in. And it's like, hey, it's December. Our season is not going to be going on much longer than this. Like we rarely play games in January. That's when the big ones get played. So that's what I mean by that. That's why I say Cowboys fans, because they get all the way up till that first or second round of the playoffs, and then their season's over and they really can't talk anymore. That's what I'm getting at here.
Ducks fly south for the winter.
Where's the national championship this year? Pretty sure it's south. So that sounds about right.
Where is it this year?
Isn't it in New Orleans or Dallas?
I thought it was in Arizona.
I could be wrong. Oh, well, either way, we're going south, baby. So let's go.
It's true. So we are going to get into it quick today because we do have a lot to go over. Obviously, we're going to start off with headlines here in a second. We will go over recaps from last week. And then we're going to break out something new kind of this week because there's not like a big, heavy preview slate. So we're going to get into the rankings, obviously go over those. And then we're going to do a segment called Scenarios. We're pretty much going to go over, like Alex mentioned a couple seconds ago, SMU is in the seat where they control their own destiny. There's a couple other teams that do as well. But we're going to go over everybody who's got a legit shot to get a championship game still. Go over all their situations, their scenario, their schedules, all that. So we're going to break all that down for you. And then obviously, as always, we still have Eliminator and pick them at the end. So we're going to hop right into it. Alex, my guy. It is your time to shine. Headlines. Let's roll.
Break the huddle, my friend. Break the huddle.
Break the huddle.
Shine bright like a diamond. All right. Just want to start off with some heavy West Coast news. USC fined for coaching violations. To give a little bit more context to the story, USC was fined $50,000 and put on 1-year probation for violations of on and off field activities. Essentially, they had exceeded their permissible number of coaches by 6 in the 2022-2023 calendar year. USC was fully compliant with the investigation, and they're ready to move past this incident. Obviously, it was a couple years ago. But anything crazy jump off the screen as far as this goes, or do you think this was just like not them not paying attention properly, or do you think there's something more behind it?
I would say the thing that jumps off the screen for me, obviously, is just inconsistency with the NCAA. I don't think this penalty should be anything more than this. From my understanding, a lot of it was kind of like graduate assistant coaches, stuff like that. You're not talking – they didn't have 3 offensive coordinators, stuff like that. So I think a lot of it was probably, kind of probably messed up in the paperwork of giving people kind of like the wrong official title and stuff like that. I think a fine is sufficient here. I'm assuming the NCAA investigated this probably to high hell trying to find something else. And if they didn't, and it was simply just a matter of, a mix up and stuff like that, then kind of like you said, I would say move past it and just move on. If they were finding recruiting violations or something like that, that's a different story. But from everything I've read, that's not what it is. So I'm kind of cool with it. And just, I think it's kind of I don't want to say a non-story, but it's just not, it's not something to get all worked up about. Let's put it that way.
I don't want to call it a non-story, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really a non-story here. Yes, it's illegal to have, 8 analysts, I believe. Alex, you said that number is 6, right?
No, they were 6 over the limit.
Okay.
They had 6 more coaches than they should have had.
But I believe I think the total number for like those off-field activities, like during that time period, like during the spring, I think you're capped at a certain. You're capped at a certain number, but it seems like they had 8 people that were involved in such things, and big deal, yes, because you're bending the rules there, and you get fined, things like that. But for me, I say it's really a non-factor because one, they did self-report. I think when you do that, you get out in front of it, and I think that's important. And then 2, ultimately, NCAA looked into it, and they found out that Lincoln Riley was doing everything that he was supposed to in terms of being in compliance with that, which is ultimately why they didn't suspend him for any number of games or anything like that. So I think it's important to get out ahead of these things because I think they started to get more strict right after the COVID times, like 2021, 2022 areas with the number of coaches and things like that were available during the springtime. But I think this is really much about nothing. And I'm glad the NCAA ultimately, gave out a proper punishment for this.
Hey, it's not like you bought the kid a cheeseburger or anything.
Right. Or, stole practice film or
Nah, that didn't happen.
Went to games and scouted or was on other teams' sidelines. So
haven't proven any of that yet.
Anyway, no, I'm just kidding. But another thing that they also sanctioned was that next season for 1 week, like the special teams coordinator isn't allowed to review film with the team. Like, did you guys read that? Like, that is a really weird punishment to throw in. Like, oh, hey, special teams dude, you don't get to go to practice or meetings for 1 week. Like,
6 days during 4 weeks of the summer or whatever, or the spring.
Yeah, it's a super weird addition. Like, I don't feel like it's necessary, but hey, whatever floats their boat. Anything else you want to talk about as far as USC being fined for coaching violations or anything on the
only other thing that I could think of, like why that would be the case there, is because when you add in something that specific, I'd almost imagine that like if you're the special teams coordinator, you can get your assistants or interns, whatever you want to call them. Maybe they were the one that signed off on having those extra people there. And it wasn't really like Lincoln's not worried about Lincoln's game planning for LSU. Like he delegates that portion of, the staff to that specific coordinator or who's in charge of, that role. That could be the only thing I can kind of think of there. But yeah,
because they also put the same restrictions on 2 defensive coordinators also. So it is curious you mentioned that. I wonder if those were the culprits who allowed the oversight to happen. I wonder if that actually would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, especially because they're not they basically deliberately said Lincoln was running things through compliance. So makes you wonder for sure.
Well, any time I can talk down on USC is always a good time. So I definitely had to throw this news article in there.
Doesn't take much right now. The way that
true, they're definitely on a downward spiral right now. In other news, Jack Del Rio, former NFL coach, and he's current senior advisor at Wisconsin, was arrested last Friday for first-time OWI, operating vehicle while intoxicated. He was booked and then released. He did resign from his position as a senior advisor. I'm surprised this didn't. I mean, it's good to see something like this not happen at Georgia. But other than that, shame on this dude, man. I mean, how dare you drive? Especially as a coach and how seasoned of a human being you are. I think that's completely unexcusable. I think that him stepping down was the right decision. I don't know if he should get another coaching opportunity, especially around kids that are learning from him like this. I don't think it's not setting a great example. What do you guys think?
Jack Del Rio's 60 plus years old. I mean, to keep it simple, he knows better.
Yeah.
Obviously, lapse in judgment. He's been around the block more than a few times. You mentioned him being kind of in like an advisory role in Wisconsin. So, I mean, I think this should be the end of the line for him. If he goes back up to the NFL ranks, I think that's fine. But when you do stuff like this, and like you kind of said, you're supposed to be setting the example for the kids that you're coaching. I don't think it would be a good look for any staff to bring him in. One being from just an optic standpoint, you bring in recruits and things like that. How can I trust you to, teach my kid how to be a man, essentially, when you have people like this in the program that do that, setting that kind of example. So I think that should be it for him for the college ranks. And I get it. People make mistakes. It was his first time doing it. But with that said, I just don't think you could bring a guy that does that back to the college ranks. And I think just tying that into how old he is as well, he wouldn't be in college that much longer anyway. Like, I don't think he would want to coach that much longer anyway. So I think it's different than a guy that's young that needs like that sort of redemption that can learn from that. I just think that the time has passed for Jack Del Rio coaching in college.
I don't disagree with anything that either one of you said. I do think you have to, to some degree, though. I mean, we especially in the sports, we give people second chances for way more egregious things than this. 68 years old, first time he's ever had. Excuse me.
Bless you, sir.
Any kind of running with the law. The problem with it being in college is, like both of you said, it's everybody in the coaching staff. That's one of the major things you're doing is you're not only developing these kids as players, you're developing them as human beings, and supposed to be setting the example of how to grow up and mature and and be grown up men and how to act when you get out of college. So that part's a little tricky. I could see him being away for the game for a year or so. But that being said, he didn't wait for any kind of, discipline or anything like that. I think he handled himself properly in that way and resigned immediately and did not bring, any more of the spotlight or any, negative publicity onto the university. Honestly, I know Alex made a joke and, I don't disagree, but at some point, I think people in Georgia should take note with what's going on down there. Because again, it's just for the most part, there's been no discipline handed out down there at all. So, unfortunate situation. Again, I think he's a good guy. He knows better. Lapse of judgment cost him his job, and it's like anything else in life. No matter how old you are, it's learning from your mistakes. I think he'll definitely do that, and he's been around the game for a long time. So, I'm not saying he's going to retire. If he does, that's his choice and good for him. But if not, if he wants to get another job, probably another year or two, I don't think he'll have a problem getting one.
I guess as a side question here, because he was just a senior advisor to the team, so I don't really know how involved he was on the day-to-day operations of practices and prepping the team at all. Do you think any news like this really affects the Wisconsin football team, or do you think that it's probably just like he's an outside figure, not really going to have too much impact on the team itself?
As a senior advisor, I feel like you're probably around the team, but he's definitely not around the kids day to day. I think it's probably more so game planning and things like that. Like, he probably doesn't even go to practice every day. Like, honestly, as a senior advisor, like, I mean, you're in that kind of role there. So I think it'll affect some of the kids, but this was his first year being there, and it's been at this point, I'd probably say. I mean, I guess I go full year. I'm sure he was there during the spring and over the summer as well. But with a coach that you don't have daily connections with and things like that, I feel like he was probably more so there for the coaches rather than the players. I'll say it like that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's more of a coaching staff, kind of a special assistant, kind of helping with game plans and stuff like that. Again, I'm sure he was at practices, during camp, and I'm sure he's probably around the team on game day, but I don't think it's, to your point, I don't think he's walking around practice every day. I don't think it's that type of situation. So, but again, you have to look at how he handled it. He resigned immediately. It's something you don't let linger. We kind of talked about it with the first one with Lincoln Riley. If you get ahead of it, a lot of the times it kind of takes the sting away from it, because there's really nothing to report. There's nothing to go on. You know what I mean? Like, the story broke the next day. He's like, I'm resigning, and by the time, the news even got around to it, it's not like you could rush to Wisconsin and make it a big story, because it was already over. So, I think everybody just moves on and does their thing, and, we'll see what happens in a year or two.
All right, on to the last of our news stories this week is update on Diego Pavia. TRO denied on Tuesday by a federal judge. The federal judge did state that he has been aware of these bylaws for the entire time he's been in the NCAA, and the fact that he's doing it now, and then trying to force the hand of the court, essentially to think that that's not fair. So the issue is not settled fully yet, and they did put an injunction in to rush the process, so that they can try to get it done before that December 9th portal entry date. But nothing else too crazy about this. Were you guys surprised? His lawyers stated that they weren't too surprised when they got their TRO denied.
I was kind of led to believe this last week when we kind of first broke it. I said that he was kind of entering a territory where it wasn't cut and dry, just because of, the actual letter of the law there. I think for me, though, seeing that he wanted to go through and get that temporary restraining order kind of put a sour taste in my mouth a little bit. Only reason being is because of that December 9th date being as important as it is. And, obviously with the portal opening up there. But for me, I say it put that sour taste in my mouth because I felt like he can actually build something there at Vanderbilt. If he can be there for another year, and I get it, you don't want this to drag out. You don't want this to linger. And I also get it, if you have the opportunity to, let's say, go be LSU's quarterback next year, go be USC's quarterback next year, you absolutely have to go take that, because that's going to give you more money in terms of NIL. And again, for a kid who knows that he's not going to the NFL, these can be life-changing decisions. By that extra year can definitely be life-changing there for you. But I was just a little disappointed that there was so much there was just so much pressure on trying to make sure that he could get this taken care of before that portal period opens. Because to me, it almost feels like he's already like 1 foot out the door almost. And I get it. You have to do what's right for you in your career, but it was just, it gave me a little sour taste. That's all.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think a lot of the times with this too, the original judges that get it don't want to be the ones that rule on it, or already know kind of that it's going to go above them anyway, which is kind of the case here. Like Alex mentioned, they filed the emergency injunction to get it sped up. This is going to end up going up to circuit court, I think, which ended up being the court that ruled in Tennessee's favor earlier. So with all the different bylaws and all the kind of different, antitrust and all that kind of stuff this is going to deal with, I think the judge made the right move and just kind of, hey, regardless of which way I rule, the other side's going to appeal, and it's going to go to the circuit court anyway. So I'm just going to shut it down now. You can go file your appeal, and it's going to go in front of the judges that it needs to go in front of anyway. So I think there'll be more to this probably in the next week or so. It'll be very interesting to see if anything changes. I agree with Cottrell. I said it last week when we talked about it. I would love to him play another year, because I think it would be, I've mentioned it before. I think Vanderbilt's kind of the feel-good story of college football this year. So him staying there and then being able to build around him for one more year and maybe even just keep Vanderbilt that much relevant, that much more relevant for another season. I think it's great for college football. I think it's good for the SEC. So be very curious to see how it plays out. I hope it works out for his benefit and his side, but we're gonna have to wait and see what happens.
All right, yeah. So obviously, I'm sure we will get more updates as the season continues. Unfortunately, Vanderbilt did come off a loss last week. Hopefully, this isn't a distraction that's going to affect his play going forward, as Vanderbilt is bowl eligible for the first time in who knows how long. But that's all we got for news stories. Let's take a look at what we got next. I think we got recaps and the conference glance. Yeah?
Yes, sir.
We're going to recaps. We only have a couple games to recap here, so
I love this.
We will start. Actually, I don't care where we start here.
Just do Ole Miss. Let's just do clockwise.
All right. We'll go Ole Miss. We'll go Ole Miss, Georgia. Kind of the preeminent game of the week, the premier game, spotlight game of the week. Georgia did not look great. Ole Miss, I think, looked more like the team at the beginning of the year. But that being said, I mean, Georgia, Cottrell's mentioned it numerous times, over and over and over again. It is – you just can't turn the ball over. You can't turn the ball over that much of the SEC. You can't really do it anywhere in football, but you play any kind of high-level football and turn the ball over like that. You're just begging to get beat. Carson Beck, not a great game. I think the limitations on offense are starting to show. The banged-up offensive line. He's not getting a full 3.5 seconds to sit in the pocket and throw. He's rushing things. He's trying to do too much. Ole Miss took advantage of it. Had a scare early in the game with Jackson Dart where it looked like he might be done for the game. Came back, played great.
Mm-hmm.
Ole Miss survives, and now Georgia is firmly on the hot seat this week. We'll get into that game a little bit later in the show. But I'll let Alex jump in here because his boy Lane Kiffin finally won a big game.
I called it. It's exactly how I said it was going to happen. We're going to control the line of scrimmage, run the ball down their throat. Jackson Dart did worry me, though, when he did get hurt and had to go out for a series. But I will tell you what, Ole Miss fans, you guys are in good hands. Austin Simmons looked solid on the one drive that he led. He is a freshman, 5 for 6 on pass attempts. So hey, that's something to look forward to for next year after Jackson Dart's out of there. But back to this game, Georgia. It felt like they were playing the offense as if they were ahead, even though they were down multiple scores. I don't know if that makes sense of what I'm trying to say. Like, they ran the ball 33 times, averaging 1.8 yards per carry, but yet they kept running the ball, even though they were down multiple possessions from the second quarter on. So their play calling was a little bit skeptical to me. Carson Beck has been playing like absolute trash lately. Let's be completely honest. A turnover every single week. I'm surprised he didn't have 2 interceptions. That seems to be the trend he's setting. But Ole Miss, like I said, every single game from here on out for them is a playoff game, and they treated it like such, and Georgia didn't. Ole Miss came out with a W, and they live on for another week, and they almost have control of their destiny here. So it was a great win for Ole Miss, and I'm glad that they're still in the race.
Yeah, and I mean, I said it last week. I know I ultimately picked Georgia, but like Bill kind of mentioned,
loser.
If you were Carson Beck and you turn the ball over multiple times, it's not going to be a recipe for success. And I know we're going to get into it again today. It's going to be the same kind of deal, though. If you get into a situation where you're giving Tennessee, and maybe it's Nico, maybe it's their backup, whoever it is, you're giving Tennessee 2 or 3 extra possessions, they're going to beat you in the football game. I don't care where it's being played at. I know this game is in Georgia. Last week it was at Ole Miss, but that's not how you play winning football. And it's funny because I picked Georgia last week, and I told you guys, we had the conversation, off air about teams that we thought could legitimately win a national championship. And I think we kind of alluded to it on the show. Georgia, I told you, I was like, I might sound crazy here, and this was before this game. I said, I might sound crazy here, but I don't think Georgia has what it takes to win a national championship. Carson Beck hasn't had a good game in over a month at this point. I told you my teams were Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and there's one more. There's one more in there. Can't remember off the top of my head, but I said I had 4. And I didn't think Georgia was ultimately going to be – Texas was the other one. But I didn't think Georgia was going to be that team this year. And it's only getting worse for him because now ETN's been ruled out for today as well. So Georgia's got a tough uphill battle to go. Carson Beck is not anything close to what he looked like last year. It looks like he's got something going on mentally. But with all that said, you have to give Ole Miss a ton of credit. They absolutely control the line of scrimmage. Alex, I'll give you, your flowers on calling that there. And the other thing with Jackson Dart is he played a good game, but he really didn't have to do much for Ole Miss. Like, everything was open. That was a complete. The score is indicative of how that game looked. It was absolute domination from Jackson Dart's first interception, and he get hurt. Like, literally, once he came back from that point forward, they outscored them the rest of the game 28-3. And that's how that game honestly felt.
Bill, any notes?
No, I mean, I tend to agree. We talked a little bit about it on Wednesday, and Cottrell just touched on it again. He doesn't look like himself. And again, I think a lot of it is that offensive line is a little banged up, and it's not as dominant as he's used to sitting back there and having time. He's rushing throws. He's forcing balls into tight windows, and on top of that, he hasn't been super accurate with the ball either. ETN, like Cottrell said, has been banged up pretty much the whole year. I don't know if he's even played a game where he's been 100% healthy yet. He's not going to play tonight. That's a big loss because even with him, they've struggled to run the ball. Without him, it's even worse. And it's, I hate to say it, but I think Georgia's one of the teams that maybe we kind of all overrated a little bit at the beginning of the year. It's hard to completely write them off because there's a point in every game for 2 or 3 drives they look great. They have spurts where they play a great half after a bad half. They're just not putting 60 minutes of football together consistently. And again, if you want to go on the road in the SEC, especially against another ranked team and win a football game, that's what you have to do. And they're struggling to do that right now. They're struggling to put 4 quarters together. I gave Cottrell his roses on Wednesday again, and I kind of agreed with it when he originally said it. I go back to the middle of the season where they came off their loss. We kind of both agreed that might be the best thing for them, and we thought it would kind of kickstart, and we would see this dominant Georgia that we're used to seeing. And then the following week, we didn't really get it, but then the week after that, we did, and I was like, okay, like they finally flipped the switch, and that's. We're going to see Georgia for the rest of the year. And they've had 3 so-so games since that game. So, like I said, I think they're fighting for their lives tonight. And honestly, I don't like Cottrell just said, he doesn't know he doesn't think they're on the national championship contender list. I would go one further. I don't think you can unequivocally say they're one of the best 12 teams in the country right now. Not the way they're playing. And that might be controversial because all the SEC people come out and, it's crazy, blah, blah, blah. But I could point to you a million different things where I could tell you that they're just not playing college football, playoff football right now.
Can we have that? Should we have that discussion now, or should we save it for when we go over the rankings?
Save it for the rankings because I think it's naturally going to come up in rankings anyway.
Because I got a little rant to go on about that because it's been eating me up just seeing – the guys talk about it.
It's crazy this year because there's you're always going to get the SEC bias, but the SEC bias is kind of getting used almost against itself this year. But I'm pretty sure I'm on the same side of this with you. So let's wait till we get to rankings and we'll go from there. We'll go Michigan, Indiana next.
Bill, I know you're very opinionated about this matchup, so why don't you just get it all out now? Because I know you got a lot to say.
They are
who we thought we were.
Thank you.
We let them off the hook.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I tell you, if I was more technical, I would sit here and be playing that clip over and over. They are exactly who I told you they both were last week. Exactly who I told they like per the T, like to the T. Listen, the reality of the situation is this. If they lose the game at all, it's probably only going to be one game. It's probably going to be to Ohio State next weekend. I don't know. I can unequivocally say this. I believe the spread. We looked at it Wednesday. I think it's 10.5. It would be almost impossible for me not to take Ohio State in the points in that game. Something would have to happen. We have differing opinions on what's going to happen depending on how that game goes. I am telling you this. Whoever gets them, if they make the college football playoff, whoever gets them in the first round is going to be happy as a pig in shit. Because I'm telling you, they play Ole Miss. They play any team like that gets in, they are going to get blasted. Blasted. They put up 20 points. Like I said, they were finally going to play a good defense. And they played a good defense without our starting defensive end, one of our starting linebackers, and the best cornerback in the country. And still only put up 20 and should have lost the game. Should have lost the game. Michigan had the ball twice in their territory in the fourth quarter and couldn't score, couldn't punch it in. They went 1 of 3 in the red zone. If you watch the game unbiasedly, there's no way you would come out of it and tell me, like, Michigan didn't look great. Michigan looked like how they have the last couple of weeks. They're playing better. They're playing better. They're not a good football team. But if you didn't know Indiana was 8-0 and you watched that football game, you would never come out of that game and tell me Indiana is a college football playoff team. Never. And I'll leave it at that. If they get in, so be it. They're in the Big Ten. Their strength of schedule is 104, whatever the hell it is. It's going to come down a little bit because of Ohio State. I am telling you point blank, they are not one of the 12 best teams in the country. I don't care what their record says. They play one of these really good teams. They are going to get blasted in the playoff. And it's going to do more damage than good. But I'm done now. I'll step off my soapbox. I told you this was going to happen. I knew exactly what they were. They weren't going to score 42 points. They weren't going to do this. They weren't going to do that. And they didn't do any of it. And they were home. I'm done.
Well, I mean, look, I'll say it like this.
Choose.
I'll keep it more lighthearted for Indiana.
Lighthearted.
Ohio State. I mean, I saw a similar thing with Ohio State playing Nebraska. They didn't look great in the game. They were at home against a team that Indiana blew out by 50, and ultimately they pulled the game out, looked bad, and they moved on from it. At this stage in the year, all you need to do is survive in advance. You can't win every game you can't blow out everybody. Some games are going to be tighter than others. Bill, let me ask you a question. Who do you think's better? Who do you think's better, Michigan or Vanderbilt?
This year?
Yeah. If Michigan and Vanderbilt played on a neutral field, who would you have winning the football game?
I mean, if Michigan's healthy, is that what we're going with? Like, yes.
Everybody's there.
Michigan probably wins, but it probably looks a lot like that game. It's probably like 23-20, 20-17, something like that.
So my point being, if we think that Michigan is the equivalent to a team like Vanderbilt, and we're in the Big Ten here, we've seen Texas struggle with Vanderbilt. We've seen Alabama lose to Vanderbilt. I get it. The way it looks, it's a little bit different. But at the same time, you got to play who's in front of you. Although Michigan is having a shit season based on their standard, that's because they went undefeated last year. Michigan's still a team with a ton of talent. I get it. Some of the guys didn't play. And I get it. Indiana's been blowing everybody out, and they haven't really played anybody. This was a close game, and they ultimately came out and won it. I'm gonna start to get in it now. But I promise I'm gonna save it for when we go over the seedings and everything.
We'll circle back to this for scenarios because Vanderbilt's a good comparison on one hand, but on the other hand, it's not. But again, we will save all that because we're going to get into it here
for sure
in a short couple minutes.
I'm just saying, at the end of the day, you can only play who's in front of you.
I get it.
And yes, this was a close game, but my real measuring stick for them is if they have this kind of game and Ohio State beats them 21-14 or 21-17. Who's to say that Indiana can't play with anybody else in the rest of the country? I saw a 27-24 game, Texas and Georgia. Oh, not Texas and Georgia, Texas and Vanderbilt. I saw 40-35 game, Texas and Alabama and Vanderbilt. So, I mean, I think you can't just judge this team based off of this one game because you get these kinds of matchups that happen. And I even referenced it with Ohio State and Nebraska a few weeks ago.
My counterpoint to that would be this. We brought this up a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, because I've been foreshadowing a little bit that long. You're like, all right, well, this is what Michigan did last year. That's fair. But then when Michigan went on the road, they beat Penn State. And then they went home and they beat Ohio State. Then it was like, okay, we know exactly what they are. But what if Indiana goes to Ohio State next week and loses by 30?
We're having a different conversation.
Okay. All right.
That needs to happen first, because when you guys are talking about this Michigan-Indiana game, I look at an Indiana team with a stacked defense. Like, you look at it as, oh, this team is, it's not who we thought they were. This is the number one ranked rushing defense in the country, allowing 72.2 yards per game. And what was it? What?
Bill's face.
I know, Bill's great. But like, Bill, you guys are a run-heavy team with a great running offense when the line is blocking. You guys ran the ball 34 times for 2 yards per carry. Like, Ohio State.
How many of our offensive line starters played on Saturday?
It doesn't matter.
It does matter. How many played?
It doesn't matter. I don't know.
It does matter.
You bet it?
Wasn't it 2?
No, it was 1. It was 1. Sorry. The second one started. He got hurt on like the third play of the game and didn't come back in. So they had 1 starter the entire game.
I'm just hearing a lot of excuses.
There's no excuses. They lost the game, but like you're now still trying to use numbers to justify Michigan.
The entire season. I'm giving you the entire season numbers, not just one game. I'm saying what they've done over the season. They're only allowing 72.2 yards per game on the ground.
They haven't played a good offense yet.
Okay, that's not what I'm trying to get at, though. I'm getting at is like this team is set up. Okay, like you say, I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State beats this team by 30. The way that Indiana's defense is built versus Ohio State's offense, just like Cottrell said, matchups are different. I think Indiana has the personnel to give Ohio State fits in the run game, which could cause that game to become close.
You have Indiana's no idea what their defense is because they have not played an elite offense yet.
Oh.
Well, you keep saying 72.2. That's great. They're playing. They've played the bottom half of the Big Ten so far. They have not played an elite offensive team yet.
Again,
and Michigan
said,
that's
you gotta
fine.
play who you have in front of you. You're killing everybody to do it.
That's fine. What happened to their offense that was scoring 49 points a game? They finally played a decent defense. What did they score Saturday?
20.
Ooh, so they're under almost 60% under their average. What happened? Why? Because they finally played a good defense. They finally played a decent defense that had athletes that could cover people and keep people in front of them. What do you think is going to happen when they play Ohio State or they play these teams from the SEC with speed?
See, I think we saw a totally different game. You saw a team that should have been beat by Michigan. I saw a team that wasn't. I saw a team that didn't put their foot down on the gas in the second half because they were up 17-6. Like, the score does not dictate how good this game was. The Ducks have been doing it all season. The Ducks have been doing it all season.
That's an Oregon issue. That's an Oregon issue. They don't have the luxury of being Oregon. They're not Oregon. If they're up 17-6 and they can't get first downs, that's not them putting their foot down. It's just they're not that offensively efficient when they're playing a team with a bunch of guys that know what the hell they're doing.
When Indiana Ohio State face off, and you see a little bit of a different Indiana team,
when I'm right again, and it's 42-17, and Ohio State beats the shit out of them, and we come back on the show, we will open the show with an apology from you. I don't know where you became an Indiana fanboy, by the way.
I'm not an Indiana fan. I'm an Ohio State hater you used to be. Now you're like, Cottrell.
No.
No, look, I'm not an Indiana fan.
I have journalistic integrity, and I'm unbiased.
So do I. And my unbiased hostesism is telling you that I think you saw a different game than I saw.
Because you're looking through Indiana Hoosier color glasses.
Bro,
you want them to be great.
I've already accepted it. Anytime Ohio State plays anybody, they could be ranked, close to being ranked, or just
1-8.
If they're going to be bowl eligible, Alex is most likely going to pick the other team. I mean, I had to deal with
That's
this
true.
shit last year when he picked Iowa and he picked what other school was it? He picked against Ohio State literally every game until Michigan, and then of course we fucking lost Michigan.
Yeah,
He like
yeah.
reverse
See?
jinxed us that
Exactly. He don't even know what's going on.
game.
15-0, one of the most top 5 or 6 dominant teams ever, and he picked Ohio State in that game.
Yeah,
But,
as a jinx,
Alex
you're
is
welcome.
Alex is always going to pick against us, and that's okay. We're okay with that.
That's because Cottrell. It's fun. I want the success Bill had last year. I want that.
I mean,
And I don't want it to be between me or you to get it. I want it just to be down to me. You know what I mean? Like
for what it's worth, Alex, I'm going to give the people a little foreshadowing here. I may get my revenge this week because Oregon is in my pick'em. So,
oh, well, Wisconsin just lost their senior advisor, so I don't know, bro.
They're gonna rally. They're gonna rally around.
They got to go to different time zones.
It's only 2 though. It's not 3.
4 and 2. And then you realize UCLA is the one team that has the 2 wins. You're like, man, kind of throws that out the window. They're trash.
On that note, all right, let's go to the
anyway,
next game.
Next game. Let's go to the other coach who doesn't win anything, Brian Kelly.
He lived up to his name.
Yes, he did. 42-13. Their season is over. I'm going to take pride in seeing their tombstone later in the show. That's not foreshadowing. That's a spoiler alert. Alabama came in, took care of business. Brian Kelly was red in the face. I thought he was going to stroke out a couple times. I was kind of looking forward to it, but it didn't happen. Yelling at people, doing his normal thing. Post-game press conference went about as expected. But this, I got to say it. This looked like a more kind of focused Alabama. I don't know if Kellen DeBoer has finally maybe turned the page with them or, some light bulbs went off in some guy's head. But I would say it's probably the most complete 60 minutes that Alabama's played all year. Going to Death Valley, I don't care how bad LSU is. Death Valley at night is a different animal. We've talked about it. It is a 1 or 1A depending on probably where you are, where you're from in the country. And LSU was really never in the game. Those fans were disappointed. Livy Dunn was probably crying somewhere. I would have consoled her if I was there, but it is Alabama moves on. They live to see another day. And LSU is sleeping with the worms. So what do you guys think?
I mean, exactly what I thought would happen did happen. I mean, Jalen Milroe absolutely dominated the ground game, 185 rushing yards. Really didn't even need to pass. They were 10 for 13. Let me say that again. They were 10 for 13 on third down efficiency. That alone is insane. On the road against a ranked SEC opponent, and you are go for 10 for 13 on third down, like that is not a recipe for victory for LSU. They could not get Alabama off the field. And then LSU put up a crap load of yards, 343 yards to be exact, but it felt like every single time they had a drive going, Alabama was able to force a turnover. They, in fact, had 3 turnovers during that game, 2 interceptions, 1 fumble. I mean, just like you said, Bill, Alabama looked focused. They looked ready. Kind of like Ole Miss, they knew that every single game from here on out is a playoff game for them. And if they have any intentions of making the college football playoff, they cannot misstep one more time this season. So I think this is Alabama we're going to see going forward. I think we're going to see a lot more of Jalen Milroe, having that, having the option to pass or pull it down and run on every single play. I think that Kalen DeBoer is going to trust his quarterback, and I think we're going to see Jalen Milroe put up video game rushing numbers until through the rest of the season.
So I think that this game kind of is as good as Alabama looked. I would have still walked away from that game with slight concerns, only being LSU was able to get a lot of chunk plays off. Alex, like you said, between penalties and the 3 turnovers, LSU could have scored a lot more points in this one. And I get it. We can't play the what-if game and things like that. But a lot of teams moving the ball that effectively, you're not going to be fortunate enough to have, 3 turnovers happen or penalties kill drives and things like that. The other thing being Jalen Milroe looked absolutely electric on the ground. I love how the offense looked with him doing that, and they didn't need to pass the ball, which is great. But did this not remind you guys of last year's Jalen Milroe when he really wasn't confident throwing the ball downfield, and Alabama's offense at a point was pretty predictable? Because to me, like, that's almost how I felt. And I get it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. So you want to keep running the things that are working for you. However, I saw how this ended last year, and it almost felt like, hey, in these moments where you kind of gotta have it and you can't just run for a 10-yard first down or a 12-yard first down, I don't necessarily know what I'm going to be getting from that Alabama offense. So I think this can be a sign of two things in the future. It could be one, hey, we unlocked Milroe's legs. Like Milroe was a great athlete for us last year, and this year we kind of want to put the focus on him being a better passer and things like that. Now we've added that dynamic back into the offense, and he's back running and he's back being explosive and getting these big plays with his legs. But on the flip side of it, to me, that Alabama offense and just watching that game, it felt so much like the 2023 version of that Alabama team. And I don't know if that's going to be a good thing for them moving forward. And, again,
worked out well for them last year pretty decently.
I mean, it did for sure, but that's the reason why Michigan won the game, if we're being honest. Michigan won the game because Alabama couldn't throw the ball. Like, Michigan knew what was coming on that last play in overtime. They knew exactly what was coming. They said, hey, Milroe's not going to try and beat us with his arm. And I get it was a bad snap and messed the timing and all that, but they knew exactly what was coming. So ultimately, that was their Achilles heel in that game there. And when you get to the playoffs, you're going to have other teams that you're going to have to be facing in these times that aren't going to give you the ball 3 times, that aren't going to just let you go off and run for 200 yards and have 4 touchdowns. So I think it can go one of 2 ways for that Alabama team, and I'd be curious to see ultimately how it all plays out for him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious again. We'll get at this in a couple of minutes, actually. But we'll see how they come down the stretch. And I do agree with Cottrell a little bit. I think he looks more mature this year. I think he's throwing the ball a little bit better. We're using the Rose Bowl as kind of a litmus test for him, and I don't know how fair that is to some degree, playing such a senior-laden, elite defense versus there's not a defense like that this year. He's not going to see that again. But
for me, it's not just that though. It's
the
Auburn game.
Yeah,
even
I do.
the game.
I understand. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
He still hasn't proven to be 2-dimensional consistently, and I do agree with that. I think he's very likely to hit the big play, and then he's also very likely to drop back and look at his zone and go uh-oh and take off, and that's still the problem. So, but that being said, you said it earlier in the show, survive in advance, and one of those teams had to do it last week, and Alabama did, and LSU didn't. So,
but I think the one last thing I'll say about this game is, Alex, remind me on the number again. What was LSU's total amount of yardage in this one? Because to me, it felt like LSU could move the ball at will. Like, it felt like they were moving the ball pretty consistently, and it was just literally every time that they were having that success, they started
343.
Like, that's a lot of yards for an offense in a game where you only have 13 points.
It's a hell of a lot of yards for 13 points.
One of the interception drives was a 71-yard drive.
Exactly.
They were driving down the field.
Killer.
Yep. So, and they had a couple drives like that were just like they were driving down the field and they stalled, or like I said, the turnover, or it's just nothing was working for LSU. They had home field advantage, and realistically, that 13 it should have been 6. I mean, they scored with what was 11 seconds left in the game. I mean, it was literally just like second string, some third string Alabama defensive players, and they drove down the field, and that right there was also 75 of those yards if we're really thinking about it. I don't know what to think about LSU this season, because like we saw them versus USC at the beginning of the season, and we were like, USC is good, LSU is not good. Season continued, LSU started getting better and better. Newsmeyer was playing fantastic, and then like things like this happens, and it bothers my brain. You know what I mean? Like just seeing teams go up and down like this all season long, and it's like
I got you mentioned one of the big things.
I got a 2-word answer why this looks like that.
Oh gosh. Brian Kelly.
Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly is correct.
And on top of that, the other thing, honestly, that you mentioned is Nussmeier. He started the year out on fire, and his last 4 games, he's not been good. Turned the ball over a lot, and again, we mentioned it. It's you can't coming down the stretch in these big games, especially when you're playing, the upper tier of your conference, have it be the Big Ten, SEC, whatever it is. You can't turn the ball over. I don't care how limited you think Jalen Milroe is. You can't give that offense 3 extra possessions versus not only versus your offense, but you're also giving them 3 extra possessions that keeps your defense on the field. You just can't do it. Can't do it. You can't do it and expect to win big football games. So let's hop over to the new rankings that came out Tuesday night. Oregon remains number 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, Indiana 5, barf. BYU is 6, Tennessee is 7, Notre Dame up to 8th. It's kind of a barf as well. Miami 9, Miami falls after their loss, as they should. Bama back to 10, Ole Miss followed by Georgia, and then Boise State at 13. Now
dropped a spot.
Dropped a spot, but
I know it doesn't matter, but that's still crazy though that they dropped a spot.
In the grand scheme of things here, Boise State is really 12, which means Georgia's on the outside looking in as of right now. Kirby Smart came out last night or yesterday afternoon. Sorry. I kind of hated the interview, if I'm being 100% honest. He went on the Pat McAfee show and said these people in the room aren't on the road and they don't understand how the environments are in our league versus other leagues. Like, bro, enough. You've lost 2 football games, and that is the reason you're in the situation that you're in. There's 12 teams that get into this. There's no excuse anymore. There's not like last year where he was a 1-loss team, and if you really wanted to make the argument that he should have been one of the top 4, I would at least have listened to it. There's no excuse anymore. 12 teams get in. Everybody in the SEC for the most part is playing almost the same schedule. And the ones that had the really easy schedule, as in Missouri, they're down to 24. They have no business being ranked, or 23, whatever they are. And A&M had a costly loss at South Carolina. So all the other teams in there, I think minus Texas, they're all in the same boat. I'm tired of the excuses and the politicking already. Don't tell me, it's that much harder to go to Ole Miss and win, or it's harder to go to Ole Miss and win than it's harder to go win at Penn State or win at Michigan or win at Oregon. Like, I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want to hear it. Everybody in the SEC has the same chance to get in. Stop bitching and go win football games, and you'll be fine. But off that little rant, as of right now, they are out. They're on the outside looking in because Boise, being the Group of 5 winner, would slide into that 12 spot, which means Ole Miss is the last at-large team. And after their win against Georgia, they deserve to be ahead of them. So head-to-head is going to be a big thing, and it's obviously going to rear its head here with a couple of these other matchups with these other teams in the top 12, which we could get into. But before that, again, just both of you guys, initial reactions on the second round of college football playoff rankings.
Alex, I'm going to be a little long-winded here, so I'll let you go ahead and get your explanations out.
Yeah, I absolutely love where the rankings are at. Tulane sneaking in at the 25 spot. Tulane and Army on a collision course for the AAC championship game. They do not play in the regular season, so like I said, they could go into that championship game here in a couple weeks. Tulane's got Navy today, and if they win, they're going to control their own destiny. And next to that, the 3 teams that we're really focusing on is Boise State, Army, and Tulane. And as we all know, the highest ranked conference champion that's not one of the main 4 gets the automatic bid. So those are the 3 teams that we're really focusing on. Like I said, I'm glad that Tulane made it in earlier in the season. They lost a couple games to Kansas State and Oklahoma. Then they were able to bounce back, and they've ran off a 6-game win streak. Oregon's number 1, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State. I can't really disagree with the top 4 at all. Miami taking that loss. You guys said last week they were begging to be beat. They stayed in the top 12, which I think is deserving. I know it looks like they're on a collision course with SMU. Probably only one ACC team is going to get into the college football playoff. Looking at the rankings right now, how they are, but we have a lot of exciting matchups coming up, and a lot of big time matchups that will affect the outcomes of the college football playoff. I expect these rankings to change dramatically over the next couple weeks going into conference championship season. So I'm excited to see how it goes, but I have really no huge issues with what I'm seeing right now as far as the top 12.
All right, so let's just get into it. For me, I have no issues with the rankings the way they are now. I think everybody is deserving of where they're at. I think if anything, Clemson being at 20 is one I look at kind of sideways, but again, that would be just me nitpicking things here. I'm perfectly fine with the top 25 the way it is. With that said, I am so tired of people that are fans of the SEC talking about, the schedules of the SEC and things like that. Look, I get it. For Georgia, it is one thing for like right now. If the season ended right now, I can understand Georgia being upset that, hey, we beat a team who is considered the number 3 team in the country and we're being left out. I 100% get that. And I get it. You lost to 2 teams right now who are sitting in position to be in the college football playoff with Ole Miss and Alabama. But guess what here? We wouldn't be in this situation where we're at right now if games like Ole Miss and Kentucky didn't happen. We wouldn't be in this situation right now if games like Alabama and Vanderbilt didn't happen. Don't tell me that these schools like Indiana, BYU, they can't beat these SEC schools when I've seen other schools who are nowhere close talent-wise to where these teams are at this season, and they've already taken down those teams. Kentucky would be 14-point dogs against BYU or Indiana neutral field. Like, I don't care any way you slice that. That would be the case there. I mean, I just saw what Ole Miss did to Georgia, and granted, that game was in Ole Miss. Well, guess what? You lost 2 games. Right now, Indiana's undefeated. BYU's undefeated. You guys will be going on the road then as well. And I don't know about you guys. We've talked about Provo. Bill, your team was in Indiana last week. I'm not saying it was absolutely wild there, but you think the first time that these teams ever go to the college football playoff that those games
Correct.
won't be rocking? Are you out of your mind? Those games, especially at night, those games are going to be absolutely insane. There's nothing that's going on in Indiana in January for college football playoff game. There's nothing going on in Utah. All their fans are going to be at that game, and they're going to be going absolutely crazy. So don't tell me that these SEC schools are just head and shoulders above these schools when we've seen them play pedestrian schools within their own conference and not just have close games, but actually lose as well. Georgia beat Kentucky by 2 points this season. There is no way you can definitively tell me that, hey, Georgia should be in the playoff because they're a better team than Indiana. Stop using the argument. Well, if these teams played on a neutral field, Georgia would win. You can't tell me that if they played on neutral field that you don't think Georgia's the better football team. Guess what? These games are no longer played on paper. They actually get played on the field now. If you were using that same logic, Boise State would have never had a chance to go beat Oklahoma, and that was a neutral site game. The biggest games that you've seen in the games that have upsets would never have the opportunities to happen. And that's what makes college football so great. And I'm so glad they moved to this 12-team playoff because now we get the games on the field. If you're not a part of the top 12, that is 110% on you. Georgia, how about you beat Ole Miss, a team who has shown that they've been inconsistent pretty much the entire year. At times, they look absolutely phenomenal. At other times, it's like, who is this Ole Miss team that's in front of me? Same thing with Alabama. If you go and Carson Beck doesn't throw those 3 interceptions in that first half and you don't come storming back in the second half, you probably beat Bama by 14 points. And we're not having this conversation right now. So I don't want to hear about other team schedules and things like that. Take care of your business and you're not going to find yourself in this situation. If Indiana goes 11-1 and they're only lost to Ohio State, granted, I know what I said earlier. I said if they lose by 30, we're going to be having a different conversation. I stick by that. I won't be tooting the Indiana horn as much. But if they go 11-1, and the argument is, well, they're down there with Georgia, who should get in there? In my opinion, I think Indiana has earned that right. I think Indiana has earned the right to be there ahead of Georgia. They're 11-1. Give them a chance. Georgia had their opportunity to get there. Same thing with BYU. If BYU goes on and for whatever reason they don't win, again, this is going to be dependent on how certain things play out. Don't try to sell me on a 3-loss SEC school is more deserving than a 1-loss BYU or a 1-loss Indiana, because I am not buying it.
No, absolutely not. I think it'll be. I think BYU is going to be the interesting case because I think if BYU gets to the championship game undefeated, I think they're in regardless of what happens in that game. And then I think what the dominoes really fall, because what happens is if BYU gets to the championship game and say Kansas State beats them in the championship game, well, Kansas State's obviously.
Bill, we're going to talk about all this here in just a second.
I know. I'm just saying. I know. I'm not getting too far into it, but I'm saying it's just there's certain teams that people are pinpointing. Like to Cottrell's point, everybody wants to talk about Indiana. Everyone wants to talk about BYU. Notre Dame is kind of, taking a shellacking to some degree, and some of it I agree with, some of it I don't. Their win over Texas A&M obviously is starting to look better and better. I'll bring this up before we get into scenarios because, again, I don't want to get too far into it because we're going to break it all down. But I think it's interesting if you look at the top line for those 5 schools in the Big Ten. And if you could really, really wanted to make the argument about which one shouldn't be there and line them up in, kind of a blind resume type thing, there's going to be 2 that are going to stick out. And it's going to be – and the SEC school is going to be one of them. But again, we'll get into that. I've heard a lot of people bring this up today. Last couple, or not today, sorry. The end of this week, it kind of became a popular topic on, some of the talk shows. I wanted you guys to get your opinion on it both real quick, because there's a part of me that disagrees with it, but there's also a part of me that I think that holds a lot of weight to it. A lot of people are saying that Notre Dame has to join a conference, and it's not fair that they're not. I know they have certain things that go against them. Like, for instance, they can go 12-0 and they can't finish in the top 4. The highest they can ever finish is the 5th seed because they don't have a conference championship game. I also still think that extra week of rest that they're going to get, it can be very beneficial to them versus other teams that are going to have to play on that week no matter what. Like Oregon, for instance, they can get to if they get to the Big Ten championship game, obviously they're undefeated, and they lose that week, they're still in the college football playoff, obviously, but their kids went and played an extra week that Notre Dame's kids aren't going to have to. I think with all the money floating around college football right now, with all the different television deals, they're not even getting prime time on NBC anymore because NBC went and signed the Big Ten contract. So any kind of Big Ten game has been on Peacock at 7:30 at night anyway. So Notre Dame's not even getting prime time slot there. How do you guys feel about a lot of people really kind of starting to make a push behind the scenes that they think Notre Dame should have to join the conference?
I mean, it makes no sense that they haven't already. I mean, they're in a conference in basketball. Was the Big East in basketball, right? I mean, I think
they're in the ACC for basketball.
Yeah, in the ACC, I couldn't remember. And honestly, I feel like it fits for football as well. I feel like an ACC schedule would fit, the Notre Dame brand, and also if you want to put your school in the best situation to make the college football playoff every year, what better conference to join than a conference that's in some downtimes right now in the ACC? So I think that they should be forced to join a conference. Kind of like you said, Bill, like it kind of creates a strategical advantage to the point where they're not playing that extra game. They get that extra week of rest. Say they do go undefeated. That 5 spot. A lot of people have been talking about that 5 spot being the sweet spot to get because you get a weak matchup in the start. You don't have to travel. You get a home game. You get a very weak opponent. A non-power 4 school. You typically would probably be that opponent. But I think. Yeah, exactly. So I think the ACC, for my brain, makes the most sense for them. But I think it definitely needs to happen. They need to kind of force their hand with something.
For me, I think it's I'm kind of torn because I can understand the argument of why they would need to join a conference, but at the same time, I do think them not being a conference is gonna bite them in the ass at some point. I think that even this year, they got a game today against the Army. If they lose that game against Army, they have no shot of making the cut. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say no shot, but
They
their
really
their
should,
chances are going to be very, very slim. And a lot of that's going to be because they don't have a chance to play for a conference championship. Because look, if you lose a game Northern Illinois, that's out of conference. If you lose to Army, if you are in the ACC, that would be an out of conference game, and you'd still be undefeated in the conference, and you'd have a shot to not just play for a conference championship, but still get a first round bye. And so I think this is a perfect example of a year that could go against Notre Dame, but I also could see how having that extra bye week and not playing conference championship game can be beneficial for them as well. So I'm really in between there. I think Notre Dame should join a conference. I've always been of that mindset. I think at this stage of the way college football is, it makes no sense to have independence. I don't think there's a need for them anymore, especially with one, how much money is being generated pretty much in every conference at this point, and then two, the things that are going to be at play here, the chances to go to the college football playoff and things like that. I think there's really no need to have an independent school, but I'm not over the moon one way or another about them making a decision.
The only thing I think that I would disagree with, I mean, listen, if they join a conference, it's going to be the Big Ten. The ACC geographically doesn't really line up for them, and they have so many rivals.
Bro, Oregon is in the Big Ten on the West Coast. You're telling me geographics are in your decision-making process on this?
If you would let me finish, I would tell you why. And you guys didn't come for geographical purposes. You guys came for the money. You're welcome.
Money, you don't even get me started on that, because Oregon will never have a big noon game, and you should be getting cut out of that pie.
Facts.
But that's another story for another day.
Another story for another show. That's all right. I mean, listen, Cottrell, I mean, Michigan and Ohio State just have to do what they have to do.
We just got to literally hold the conference up every single week for Big Noon. Like, Ohio State's been sacrificed at the altar to get. And granted, there's a lot of people, Ohio State fans, that have been getting at Gus and Joel Klatt for not being excited about the games. I love both of them, so I'm not upset they call our games, but it is a little annoying that we can never get a night game, and it's because there's so many West Coast. And Oregon's not. I'm not saying Oregon's not deserving of a big noon game. It's the fact that it would never make sense to play a 9 a.m. game on the West Coast. So
why don't we do this? Washington State.
No, relax.
Pac-10. Let's go.
So and if we're being 100% honest, the only time Oregon's going to be on that is if they're playing at Michigan, at Ohio State, or probably at Penn State. That's the only time it's going to happen. And to Cottrell's point, it's not fair for them to do it for you guys if you're home, because it makes no sense to play a 9 a.m. football game. So that's stupid. But back to Notre Dame, it would be the Big Ten. Again, geographically, it would make sense. They recruit in all those areas. But on top of that, all of their natural, I would say outside of USC, all their other main rivals are in that conference already. You have Michigan, you have Penn State. Yeah, you have Michigan State, you have Penn State. Like, all the teams that historically they've played against, they're all in the Big Ten. And it would add so much to the conference, and it would add so much for Notre Dame. Notre Dame would be getting value back out of that, knowing they don't have to schedule now. If they want to play Ohio State for home and home, you don't have to schedule it because you're going to play them pretty much every other year anyway. So if they join a conference, it's going to be the Big Ten. We'll see what happens down the road here in the next couple of years, but we've been hinting at it long enough. Let's get off these rankings. Let's get into scenarios and let's get into the craziness. So, Group of 5. We will start here. I think it's a great place to start. Obviously, Boise State, based on the rankings, currently they're in. They are in the driver's seat right now. Have San Jose State later tonight. Very winnable game. Wyoming on a down year. Very winnable game. And they have Oregon State at home, which is obviously a major conference team, but not having a very good year. I would be shocked if Boise State doesn't win out. I think they would have to have a major hiccup somewhere. And if they win out, they're in. It's really that simple. Do you guys see it any differently?
If they win out, I do not see it any differently. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this team, the only loss was to obviously the number one team of the country in Oregon, and they played them extremely tough all game long. Even had the chance to win that game, so that loss pretty much looks like a win as far as the how people are looking at them. And I mean, like I said, I think the toughest matchup for them is going to be Boise State. It's going to be Oregon State. Oregon State right now is 4-5. They're 2 wins away from being bowl eligible. They play Air Force today at 12:30. Very winnable game for them. And then they play Washington State next week. Then, obviously the 18th ranked Washington State team is having a fantastic year. I think Washington State wins that game as well, which the reason I'm talking about this is that means that Boise State-Oregon State game is going to be for Oregon State's bowl game. Like that's going to be for their college football bowl berth. They're going to get to a bowl this year. So I think Oregon State is going to be a tough matchup, and that last game of the season, especially because here's the worst part. By the time they play Oregon State, they would have already locked up playing in the Mountain West Conference Championship game. So that Oregon State game, Oregon State's going in there with nothing to lose, and Boise State's going in there with everything to lose. So I think that third game could be a little bit of a speed bump, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
So here's why I don't think it's a foregone conclusion there. I think if Army takes care of business later today, and that's a big if, but if they take care of business later today and beat Notre Dame, I think there is a conversation that would need to be had about how high does Army go. And I think we would be looking at a week-to-week basis with the evaluation of these two teams. Alex, you say it. If Boise State is going up against Oregon State and that game's tight, and Army has the luxury of playing UTSA to I know they play Navy to ultimately end the year, but that same week would be the same week as Army playing UTSA, and Army goes out there and wins by 40 points or whatever. I do think an eye test would be applicable there, especially against an Oregon State team who at that time would be at best 5-6. I think that's fair to say. Mm-hmm. So you talk about the loss to Oregon being a good loss. I mean, I agree with you there, but at the same time, if you're telling me that Army's undefeated and they've beaten a number 8th ranked Notre Dame team, I think you would have to compare resumes there. Army hasn't had a close game literally this entire year. So at what point do you say, what else does Army need to do to make that argument to be up there with a team like Boise State?
But then you make Bill's Indiana argument of who have they played.
I get that. That. But I think beating the number 8th ranked team is going to be different than
this gets into the Michigan thing from last year. If once you come up against that big team and you beat them, it silences everything. Again, if Indiana goes and beats Ohio State in Columbus, then I won't say a word. What Army needs to happen, obviously they need, again, if they could somehow upset Notre Dame today, it would be. I think it makes it very interesting because not only do I think Notre Dame falls out, to Cottrell's point, you then have to rank Army above Notre Dame. So how far do they bury Notre Dame?
Can we stop for a second pretending like Army, and I mean no disrespect for the men and women who are serving our country, but can we stop for a second pretending like Army has a chance to beat Notre Dame?
No, because you clearly haven't watched Army play then.
I have watched Army play. I've also watched Notre Dame play. I watched Navy play as well. I watched Notre Dame dismantle an undefeated Navy team.
But you Navy's thought Navy was going to be
Navy's worst game of the year. They turned the ball over 6 times. I think Army leads the country in turnovers, I believe. I think they've turned the ball over less than anybody in the country. I thought I heard that earlier.
I think I do think I've heard that. Yeah. I mean, they run the ball 99.9% of the time.
Listen, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but let's not act like it's a foregone conclusion.
No, but we're talking about it a lot. This is a very definitely.
They lost to Northern Illinois, who's 500 now.
I couldn't get it out fast enough. I literally couldn't get it out fast enough. Like, let's not act like we haven't seen this.
You think they're going to overlook an opponent twice in one season?
Bro, they lost to Northern Illinois at home.
If Notre Dame loses to Army, their head coach is fired. Like, he's done. Like, you might not be. If Notre Dame loses,
Marcus Freeman
Notre
goes
Dame loses
10-0
to Army
this year and wins a bowl game, Marcus Freeman is not getting
and he
fired.
loses to Northern Illinois and Army.
If you don't make the, yeah,
are you serious?
Time out. He's been a little shaky. If he loses to Northern Illinois and Army both at home, it doesn't make the college football playoff because of that. I'm not saying for sure he gets. I'm not saying for sure he gets whacked. I'm telling you, there is definitely going to be people calling for him to get fired within that
which would make sense. But at the same time, you think that the straw that's going to break the camel's back is going to be Marcus Freeman losing to an Army team that looks like, again, this is a speculation here, they're going to let go of Marcus Freeman for losing to a team like Army that made the college football playoff. Like, let's just go out. I mean, they beat Notre Dame this week. They're going to be in that conversation. They might ultimately make it in. You think they're going to let go of them because of that? Notre Dame's still going to be in a big time New Year's Six bowl game. 10-2, they go beat USC. They're still in
that doesn't matter anymore, man. The New Year, that's the one thing that I don't like about the playoff. And
you're right. It doesn't matter as much.
It's one of the very few things. They don't matter anymore, man. They don't. If you're not in the playoff, those bowl games don't matter anymore. If you're talking, I'll put it to you in more blunt terms. You're talking about a team who a lot of people picked, to not only make, almost everybody has them in the playoff at the beginning of the preseason, and some people have them in the Final Four, man. Like that was all preseason. So yeah, if you're telling me a team that was looked at that highly starts off the season, goes to Texas A&M and wins, but then turns around and loses at home to a Northern Illinois team who's struggling to be 500 right now, and an Army team, both on your home turf, and you don't make the college football playoff, that's a disappointed season. That's a waste of a season. I'm not saying he definitely gets fired, but to act like the call, like winning 10 games at Notre Dame and not making the college football playoff is not going to cut it anymore. Brian Kelly got away with that because there was only 4 teams that made it every year. If there's 12 teams making the playoff every year and you're not in it every year, but you win 10 games, you 100% will not keep your job at Notre Dame. Like that's a bona fide fact. And I'm not, and I
the boot in year 2 by doing that.
And I don't disagree with that. I don't necessarily say, I'm not saying for sure that this would be the year that they wouldn't give him one more, but he would firmly be on the hot seat for next year. Like there would be no more excuses. And I promise you there'll be some boosters that would want him out after this. Because, this is a team that a lot of people thought were going to make a deep run. The interesting part of this would then become, like I said, how far they would bury Notre Dame, because again, Army would have to be ranked ahead of them next week. And then to Cottrell's point, how close is Boise State and Army compared to each other, or does Army pass them? I guess that's the big question. If they go to Notre Dame and win, that's the best win that either team has. Would we all agree on that?
For sure. So, I mean, does Army slip up to 11, 12, or 13, and does Boise go backwards? Because I look at it this way: if you're putting Army ahead of them after the Notre Dame win, Boise doesn't have anybody left that's going to be of any kind of value that you're going to say they pass Army. So then, for me, then Army wins out. They're in. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. I mean, because Army's got Notre Dame, UTSA, and then the conference championship game, most likely against Tulane. Yeah, the way it stands now, and I think Tulane controls with Navy and Memphis. I think that Memphis game will be tough. Like I said, Memphis is 8-2. That's going to be a barn. That's going to be a great game. I do think it will be Tulane though. But if they win that and they take care of Navy, I think it's tough though, because it's like you beat Notre Dame. That's a win against a team who lost to Northern Illinois and you. And then Boise State had one loss, but they lost to the number 1 team in the country by less than a field goal. So it's like that's a really tough comparison, because at that point Notre Dame's probably going to be like what, 18th, 19th ranked. So I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we got Tulane down there as well, and I think it would take a miracle for them to actually get in, but definitely appreciate highlighting their success here. And
well, 2 things that actually, Cottrell, it's not that crazy, and this is why I say so. All that needs to happen is Boise State doesn't win their conference championship. Tulane does. Then they would be the highest ranked conference champion. So it's honestly not that far fetched that they would make it in. So
But
that's
they
why I
would
want to
also,
include them on this.
but they would also need to pass Army as well.
If they beat Army in the championship to become a conference champion, they would.
Yeah.
So, like I said,
Tulane, Tulane definitely has a path to get there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't count your chickens with Tulane having to go to Navy later today either. So I mean, and that's not going to be an easy game as well. So there's a lot.
Yes. Do I think Boise loses the rest of the year? No. Do I think Army beats Notre Dame today? No. But with that said, I mean, I think Tulane would need something that's unexpected to fall in their favor.
I think San Jose State might help them tonight.
All right. Well, we'll get into that later. Where are we going next?
We are going to
ACC. This has obviously got a little convoluted after Miami and Clemson both got their teeth kicked in last week.
Just so everybody knows, this is the order that they are in the standings right now. So every single conference will be in standings order, just so everybody knows.
So
Clemson sucks.
Clemson so sucks. Yeah,
they do. I mean, I don't
SMU. Yeah, I mean, let's start up top. I think SMU is. I don't like using the word lock because I don't want to jinx them.
Lock. Say it. Lock. It's okay. Lock. A lock for the AC championship game. Yes, they're going to beat Boston College. They're going to beat Virginia. They're going to beat Cal. You can say it, Bill. It's okay.
Cal is the one that's a little bit. I don't want to say concerning, but hear me out. Those kids will then again. Boston College is coming to town today without their quarterback. That team's disarray right now. I expect SMU to steamroll them. Virginia is not good. I don't think they stumble there. The only thing I say is you're now at home. You're playing Cal. I wouldn't even be surprised if like game day goes there. Like then it just becomes very real, becomes very put in your face what you're playing for. And it gets very interesting.
Why in the hell would game day go to SMU versus Cal?
Depends who else is playing that week.
Ohio State, Michigan.
They're not going there for that game this year.
South Carolina, Clemson. I'd give that.
I don't. Over. Again, I think they go to Clemson every year. It obviously the 30th is always reserved for Ohio State, Michigan if they're both good. I'm saying if there's every year they're going to skip it, it's going to be this year. I'm saying they might
burst your bubble, Bill, but
they might give
SMU makes it to Cal undefeated, they would already be in the conference championship game.
I get it. You still don't want the loss, though, is my point.
I get it. But if you win the ACC championship, like, fuck it.
I get it.
Yeah, but you don't want that loss because then you run the risk of not being a top 4 seed. If SMU runs the table and they win the ACC championship, they're already ahead of Boise. They're already ahead of Tulane and all them. So they would get that fourth seed there. So I do understand the sentiment there. But look, that Cal game is going to be irrelevant to me. It's going to be a home game. And Cal, say what you want about them. I get it. They've been better than advertised and all this stuff. I wasn't expecting them to be world beaters this year. And, they've had a decent year. They are the only team this season to lose a football game to Florida State. Do not sell me on Cal beating this SMU team that has everything to play for.
I won't, but I'm just saying they were also an atrocious non-call away from beating Miami as well. So
that doesn't take much these days.
But, all right, let's talk about Miami because I think we all agree SMU is going to be there. Wake Forest at home. I think that's a great kind of bounce back game for them, kind of get their heads on right. And then at Syracuse, I don't want to say they lose that game, but they play shaky games. Syracuse isn't the easiest place in the world to go. Does Kyle McCord have a good game that week? I don't know.
That's a good question.
I mean, I don't know what happens when they go up there. So, and then Clemson's got a tricky one today at Pitt. Then they have the Citadel. I mean, how the hell did that get scheduled in whatever? I can't.
That's an SEC special right there.
Yeah, it
Well,
is.
what?
Yeah, exactly.
Alabama's playing Mercer today. I mean, there's a bunch of matchups that
SEC
are
special. That's why I say this late in the year. That's what they love doing.
Alabama's got Mercer. I know Georgia has. I think Georgia has one of these teams.
Massachusetts, or I think it's Massachusetts.
Yeah,
I tried to spell their name earlier and I misspelled it a bunch of times.
Yeah, SEC scheduling, man. They do it this late in the year. It pisses me off to no end. Get the non-conference games out of the way at the beginning of the year. Or, like the rumor has it, and again, we're not on the SEC yet. Rumor has it they've been thinking about just moving to a 9-game SEC schedule and only having 3 out of conference game, which is I would absolutely love that. You SEC fans want to keep bitching and complaining about your schedule being tough.
True.
And you want to talk about like the non-conference games, that them being too tough, and Georgia, faced Clemson and all that. I don't care. You could play Mercer, Marshall, and God knows who, Toledo, for all I care. If you have 9 SEC games and you got to face LSU, Bama, and Georgia all in the same year, that is A-okay with me. You will hear no complaints out of me. So if that's what you want to do to avoid the competition, then I am perfectly fine with that.
And then Clemson will finish with South Carolina, who has kind of been resurgent in the second half of the year. Big win last week against Texas A&M. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that game, because that game has a chance of not mattering at all. Obviously, if Miami holds serve, then you're going to get SMU Miami in the championship game. So Clemson needs help, and Clemson has the hardest schedule left. So very, very interesting stuff going on down in Clemson. They call themselves Death Valley too, but whatever.
Yeah, so the tiebreakers are really interesting because right now, like you said, Miami has the head-to-head with the Louisville game. Miami has that kind of inside track there. So, I called the SMU Miami ACC championship at the beginning of the season. That's what it's looking like it's going to be. I'm not going to say I'm psychic, but I might be. I don't know.
Bill, you say that Clemson has tougher schedule. If Clemson gets through today, then the rest of those 2 games don't matter.
That's true.
All they would have to do is need Miami to lose to either Wake Forest or on the road at Syracuse. And the way Miami has looked the last 3 weeks, I don't think either of those. They won't lose today to Wake Forest, but going to Syracuse and winning that game is ultimately going to be for a berth for that championship appearance. So Clemson would have the luxury of not playing for their lives every week, but also at the same time, they'd be at the mercy of Miami's feet there, praying for a loss.
Yeah. All right. ACC is pretty straightforward. Where are we going next? Big 12. This is not straightforward.
Only reason BYU is not here because they are. Go ahead, Alex. My bad.
You're good. I was going to say BYU's not on this list because they're locked in to that Big 12 championship.
Essentially, they're not, but they are basically.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the 4 teams that are fighting for that second Big 12 championship spot in Colorado, Iowa State, Kansas State, Arizona State. All right, Bill, take it away.
All right. So let's start up top. Dion has the inside track now to kind of pull off the unthinkable at the beginning of the season.
It's crazy. Honestly, I completely brushed them off week 1 when they almost lost to North Dakota State, or was North Dakota? I forget which one they played.
State.
When they almost lost that game, I was like, done. And then when they lost to Nebraska, I was like, done. And then they completely turned the season around. So hands off to Coach Sanders, man, because
I think they're 3 complete football games away from, possibly going to the Big 12 championship game and possibly making the college football playoff. Listen, Utah has fallen apart, and they have them at home. They should win that game. At Kansas, they're just not good. That Colorado's offense should score at will there. Obviously, you don't want to run the risk of, Jalen Daniels pulling out the, miracle senior night game, which he's very capable of doing. But and then you have OK State at home, which is a team that has absolutely quit on the season. So they have the inside track. I would argue they probably have the easiest schedule. Iowa State, horrible loss to Texas Tech at home. Really kind of derailed their momentum and their chance to get in. Cincinnati at home, I would say tricky game maybe. at Utah, like we just talked about, and then they finish at Kansas State. Kansas State and Arizona State just have gauntlets here. They play each other later today. So, I mean, inevitably, one of these teams is probably out by the time we come on air next week. And then, depending on who wins, Kansas State either has Cincinnati left, and then they have to go to Iowa State, and that becomes another elimination game. But that might not matter because if Colorado wins out, it's not going to matter. Arizona State, like I said, is Kansas State. Then they have BYU, which could be a meaningless game if they lose later today. And they finish with a rivalry game against Arizona. So 3 of these 4 teams are going to play each other, which is awesome. But like I said, Colorado has positioned themselves. They don't play any of these 3 teams. And I think it's very clear just looking at it on paper. I think they have the easiest schedule of any of the 4 teams left by a mile, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, and did you see the news? Did you see the news today? And I don't know how true it is because obviously we aren't fully there yet. But Isaac Wilson is rumored to not be playing today because apparently he has mono. It's been a lot of reports seen, and it's not just like Twitter reports. There's been reporters out that cover Utah and Utah State that have been on the story. It's been really developing since last night. So I think that would mean Utah would be down to their 5th string quarterback, which would make today's game even that much easier for Colorado. The spread's already jumped up 3 points. I think it's at 13.5 now. So Colorado's definitely put themselves in a great position. And the other thing too is that Kansas and Oklahoma State, these are 2 teams that are not the same team that, at the beginning of the season, if you said, oh, they got to end the year at Kansas and Oklahoma State, it's like, man, those are going to be 2 tough games. And now it's like, oh, well, Kansas and Oklahoma State, you look at the outlook of the rest of the conference and it's like, those are probably 2 of the games that you would handpick to have to end your season. So it's crazy how things look so different from the beginning of the year. But Iowa State, Kansas State, and even Arizona State there, it's wild how much they have to all play each other, and still may not be enough if Colorado holds serve.
So to update Isaac Wilson before Alex jumps in here, as of 2 hours ago, reports are all starting to indicate to looking like he is not going to play today. So I guess there is some truth behind that rumor, but it does not look like Isaac Wilson's going to suit up or dress today. So to Cottrell's point, Colorado's going to be playing against a 5th string quarterback this afternoon.
Hey, but like I said, really quick before we kind of jump into the next conferences is, hey, like you guys said, Colorado controls their own destiny, and that is true. But they cannot misstep one more time because they do not hold a tiebreaker against a team like Kansas State, who is their 1 conference loss. Here's something I want to bring up. You guys talk about Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State being the 3 teams you kind of want to face down the stretch. Let me give you guys some numbers on Kansas. They did not start off well. They had a 5-game losing streak right there in the middle of the season. But at Arizona State, they lost that game 35-31. They destroyed Houston. Then they lost to Kansas State by 2. And then last week, they beat 17th-ranked Iowa State. So this Kansas team in the last 4 weeks have really been clicking on all cylinders. So I don't think that Kansas game, especially on the road at Kansas, and that's where Kansas plays the best, I don't think that game against Kansas is going to be cakewalk. And I think that might be where Colorado stumbles. If they stumble at all, it'll be that game. And if they do stumble in that game, that's where Kansas State's opportunity opens up to kind of jump into control their own destiny.
No, I see what you're doing, Alex. You're trying to get back on the Avery Johnson to the college football playoff way.
Let's go, baby. Kansas State can do this. They got a tough schedule. Arizona State's a great opponent. Cincinnati is going to be tough. Iowa State's a banger to end the season with.
All right. So let's hop to the SEC because this is where obviously it gets very convoluted and tricky here. We have 2 slides for the SEC, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So we'll start Georgia and Alabama here. Alabama, we've talked about. They have Mercer. That's a joke. Oklahoma, not very good. Iron Bowl against Auburn. Alabama should win out. They're easy. Georgia. At home against Tennessee tonight, tricky one. Massachusetts, awful. And then they finish against Georgia Tech, who I mean, listen, Georgia doesn't show with their A game for that game. That game gets way more tricky than it needs to be. Georgia Tech is more than capable of beating Georgia this year. Obviously, they play Tennessee tonight. For all intents and purposes, that's an elimination game. It's a playoff game tonight. Prime time, 7:30. What do you guys think about these two?
I mean, Alabama definitely has the easier, the best path to get there. Because Alabama wins out, and Georgia finds a way to beat Tennessee, then Alabama's in. I mean, so I think Alabama definitely has that path. And I think Georgia, the way that they've been playing lately, I don't think that anybody, even their fans, have a lot of confidence going into today's game against a number 7 ranked team. And then again, like you said, that Georgia Tech game at the end of the season, that rivalry game, anything can happen. Georgia Tech's been playing fantastic ball this year. Haynes King he is truly a difference maker and can fluctuate the score 14 points either direction. So that game will be a toss-up. But I think it all comes down to today. And I think Alabama has the easier path. And I think if either of these two teams were to make it there, I think Alabama would be the team that I would put my money behind.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama definitely has the easier path here. I think it just gets interesting when it comes down to figuring out who's going to ultimately be going to the SEC championship game. Texas and Texas A&M have both done enough, as long as they hold serve the rest of their upcoming schedule, which we'll get there soon. They've done enough to where they will be one of the teams. They play each other at the end of the year, and they will be one of the teams that represents the SEC in that championship game. The other part of it is that the tiebreakers can really get absolutely insane here, because if you have, I was literally just looking at it, and I probably should have wrote it down here, but you got an opportunity to potentially have 6 2-loss SEC teams in the conference there, and it comes down to some really, really weird tiebreakers. So, but first things first, like you said, Bill, you got to take care. If you're Georgia, you got to take care of business today at home against Tennessee. You lose this game, you are out. And for Tennessee, I know we're going to get to them soon, but they're almost at a point this season where they're at 7 right now. If you lose this game to Georgia, you might be finding yourselves on the outside looking in as well, because there's not going to be that much help that's coming your way there, because a lot of the teams within the top 12, they're not really playing each other. So, like, if they hold serve, you'll get Oregon and Ohio State again for the Big Ten championship, or you'll get, Oregon, Indiana for the Big Ten championship. Neither of those teams are going to be dropping out of the college football playoff race to,
True.
Open up a spot for Tennessee. So I think, for Georgia, obviously this is an elimination game, but I think for Tennessee as well, depending on how you look, this could be one for you as well, although you only have 1 loss at this point.
It would be really interesting to see how far Tennessee would fall if they lost. I think what type of game it is matters. Obviously, with it being in Georgia, if it's a walk-off field goal or something like that, I don't know how much they get penalized per se. But here's just the reality of the situation. We talked a bit at the beginning of the season about how we thought a 3-loss team might get in, like a 3-loss Michigan team might get in or something like that. There is no shot a 3-loss team is getting in this playoff. And you could thank BYU for that. You could thank Indiana for that. Indiana, I guess you could argue, kind of took took Michigan's spot. So you could realistically say, the Big Ten was getting 4 in no matter what. But nobody had them 9-0. And then obviously, Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon, I think everybody all agreed they were going to get in. There's no shot you're getting in this playoff with 3 losses. There's none. I don't care if you're the SEC. I don't care if you're Alabama. I don't care who you are. It's just not going to happen. Like I said, BYU taking up a spot, being undefeated. And again, I think if they make the championship game, I think they're locked in no matter what happens in that game. And then God forbid, like I said, they lose that game to Kansas State. That's taking up another spot for an SEC or another at-large big team, something like that. So let's go to the other slide here.
While we're here, though, I want to ask you guys, who do you have, Georgia, Tennessee? Because I'm personally I'm going back to the well. I'm rolling with Georgia here, but I think Tennessee. Again, I know I shouldn't say that. Nico's a game time decision tonight. Nico's a game time decision tonight. I said it on Wire to Wire on Wednesday. If he plays, I'm rolling with Tennessee. If he doesn't play, I'm rolling with Georgia. I'm keeping it plain and simple for you guys. I think he can be the difference in a win.
I don't disagree with that. I'm going with Georgia no matter what. That being said, this is not a confident pick. I said it on Wednesday. I will not be shocked if Tennessee goes into Athens and wins that football game. This is not your Georgia team from 21, 22, or even 23. If they don't come out and play good football, and Nico does play, Tennessee is more than capable of going in there and winning that football game. I will not be surprised at all. I picked Georgia at the beginning of the year. I'm going to be stubborn. I find it hard to believe that team will not be ready to play later tonight under Kirby Smart, but I feel like Kirby. I feel like Georgia's. I'm just going to say it. Georgia's been disappointing this year for a number of reasons, and some of the lapses. I think is some of it you have to put on the coach. They've just not looked ready to play sometimes. But I think with everything on the line, I would be equally as shocked if Florida or if Georgia doesn't come out looking ready to play tonight as I would if Tennessee won the game. But I'm going to stay with Georgia.
Alex, who you got?
Georgia's absolutely winning this game. Tennessee has had 4 straight wins, 4 straight home games. 5 games ago, though, they went to Arkansas, lost 19-14, and the game before that at Oklahoma, they won 25-15, but the game was much closer than that 10-point difference. Tennessee's a different team on the road, and I think that Georgia is going to get their stuff together, knowing that every game from here is a playoff game. I've said that a lot, but that mentality takes you a long way. The inexperience of Tennessee, the experience of Georgia, and Tennessee's lack of consistency on the road spells a Georgia win for me pretty easily.
Oh, I don't know why that one's blank, but that's cool. Let's do this. I'll pull up the other SEC slide here.
Which is good. But while you're pulling that up, just like I said, ESPN has some updated statistics. Texas is the front runner right now to win the SEC at 38%. Alabama is actually second favorite to win the SEC at 31%, followed by Tennessee and Georgia. It's interesting to kind of hear it that way. Alabama has the second highest chance of winning the SEC right now.
All right. We'll start up top with Tennessee. We talked about the Georgia game tonight already, so that's easy. They should beat UTEP, no problem. I would say at home they'll beat Vanderbilt, but again, I think that's a game that at the beginning of the year that was like, okay, mark that as a W, and now it's like, we got to go play good football. A&M really shot themselves in the foot. They were by far the front runner to get into the conference championship game. That loss to South Carolina hurt them a lot. You're not going to gain much at New Mexico State or at Auburn because that is Auburn's just not good. Last week of the year, Texas A&M, Texas, that game is going to hold some weight.
All the weight. That will either be that's going to get interesting. A&M wins that game. I don't know where Texas gets knocked down to. I would assume, does that put A&M in the championship game then? Absolutely. Texas, as long as both of teams hold serve, Texas versus Texas A&M, the winner of that game is going to the SEC championship game.
So, again, that would be something where they are probably taking a spot of somebody because I don't think Texas would fall out of the top 12, and you can make the argument they should, and I'm here to hear it and listen to it. I'm just telling you I don't think it's going to happen. And if A&M gets in there and wins that game, again, they're 17th right now? Something like that?
Who?
15.
Yeah.
They are going to jump in and they're going to push somebody else out. So, again, another chance for somebody to steal the bid. Ole Miss has Florida. Swamp's never easy to go play. We've talked about it before. They're going to get Langway. And then Mississippi State's terrible. So, A little bit of a tricky game, but Ole Miss needs help. Ole Miss needs help. I don't know.
I mean, for me, I think it's easy. A&M and Texas, they get the luxury of really just beating two teams that they should beat, and then they got to face each other for a shot for the SEC championship game. That for Texas A&M, that's a playoff game for Texas. You obviously like to win that game, but even if you lose, you're most likely going to be in. And then for Tennessee and Ole Miss, I mean, they really have nobody to blame but themselves here. If Ole Miss takes care of business against Kentucky, they're not in this situation. And for Tennessee, everything's in front of them right now with Georgia. So if you beat Georgia today and you run the table here, you're going to be going up against the winner of that Texas and Texas A&M game. So, I mean, I think these teams have everything in front of them. And if they don't ultimately make it, it is on themselves for not taking care of business in games they should have won.
All right, so question. A&M beats Texas, and we're saying Georgia beats Tennessee. So then who does A&M play in the championship game?
Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's Ole Miss.
God damn,
no.
Really?
Well,
or is it Alabama?
No. If Alabama wins out, Alabama's in. Because they hold the tiebreaker with conference win-loss record. So it puts them. Yeah, like I said, the odds to win the SEC right now is Alabama is 31%. They are the second behind Texas to win the SEC right now. So Alabama is the second best odds.
So Ole Miss is definitely hoping Texas wins that game then.
Yeah.
Man, Ole Miss is going to be on the bubble. That's going to be an interesting night for them depending on what happens. That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
All right, let's hop over.
Also, quick though, go ahead and switch slides. Go ahead and switch the slides. But Ole Miss, I think they want to win out and almost not make the conference championship game because I think if they win two more games, I think they are on that 10-10 spot. I think going to the conference championship game, a third loss would knock them out. So I think them not making it might be the best thing to happen.
But
if you go and win, you're guaranteeing you're in.
I know.
Yeah, here's the issue with that. If Colorado somehow beats BYU in the Big 12 championship game, or even SMU beating Miami in that game, I don't think two ACC teams gets in, but then you leave it up to chance, and that's not going to be good for you.
You're then sitting on, like I said, you're then sitting on that 11 or 12 seed line. That is not where you want to be, knowing, especially if say Army loses today and Boise State's hold serves. You know Boise State's going to be in that 12 or 13, so they're automatically getting kicked to 12, which means there's no room for error for Ole Miss then. If there's anything more than one upset, like Cottrell said, then they're going to be the ones to get booted out. So you do not want to be on the 11 line come Sunday night that a couple weeks from now.
And I know the Big Ten is our conference here, and we're still starting to come up against. You got about 12 minutes till games start kicking off there.
This is easy though.
I was gonna say this is really the easiest one. Oregon, they take care of business today against Wisconsin. They take care of business the end of the year against Washington. They're going to be in the Big Ten championship, no problem. Indiana and Ohio State next week, they are going to be fighting for that second spot in going to Indianapolis. Penn State's here for eye candy. If Ohio State and Indiana both lose two games, then
some craziness has to happen.
But outside of that, this is really a two-horse battle here. We know Oregon's going. We know Penn State's not going. Ohio State and Indiana play each other, and that's going to be for a shot to represent the Big Ten going to Indianapolis to play for a conference championship. This one's pretty cut and dry for me, so don't feel like we need to go through those games either because really Ohio State and Indiana is really the only big one left. Of course, Ohio State and Michigan's big, but as far as like implications go for conference championship, things like that, I think we all can agree on we expect the favorites to win the majority of these games.
If I'm not mistaken, Oregon locks up their spot today if they win. So that's one spot locked down.
Yeah, because they would hold. Because even if Ohio State won out at that point,
they hold the tiebreaker.
Yeah, they hold the tie. I guess they would still be So they clinched today. The only remotely place where this gets tricky is if somehow beats Ohio State. That's it. That's it because you could say Ohio State comes off an emotional win against Indiana. I don't know how they would have a letdown against Michigan for that rivalry game, but if somehow it happens, then who would get in then though?
I guess it would be
would it be Penn State or is it Indiana?
I think it's Penn State based on the same thing that we talked about from the SEC, like for
the
Bama,
win-loss
like getting in the
combined with the
win-loss
loss
from the
record. Yeah.
Honestly, if I'm Penn State, I'm hoping chalk happens here because I don't think they fall any lower than like 6 or 7 then.
I'm pretty sure Penn State's locked into the College
And
World Playoff at this point, if we're being honest.
I'm saying locked in, but you want to make sure you get a home game is my point.
Of course.
Yeah, so I think if they take care
they're
of
locked
business.
in there too. If you're at 4 and you don't lose a game to end the season, I mean, how far can you fall?
That's what I'm saying. I don't think they could
5
fall
spots, 6 spots.
I don't think they could possibly fall any lower than 6 or 7, which means they would definitely have a home game. So, but Big Ten was easy. So let's go to Eliminator real quick.
Yeah, pick them first. Don't
pick them first.
There.
All right. God, so pushy.
I have so many games today. Like I have so many games I could not pick between today. So I'm excited for it.
Ooh, back in last place.
Wow, bro. Wow.
All right, I'll go quick because, like I said, we, I do these on Wednesday. So here we go. I mentioned this game earlier. Pittsburgh plus 10.5 at Clemson. I think Clemson, at Pittsburgh. Sorry. It's a tricky road game for Clemson. I think Pittsburgh's been playing well. I think they have a bounce back game. I think Narduzzi kind of rallies the troops a little bit. Clemson, I think, probably sneaks out a win, but I don't think it's by 10.5. I think that's a huge number on the road for a Clemson team that quite honestly isn't that good away from Clemson. So give me Pittsburgh plus a 10.5. Second game, Washington State minus 10.5 at New Mexico. I'm going to take Washington State with the spread there. New Mexico is struggling to stop anybody at this point, giving up around an average of 40 points their last 5 games, all losses. Washington State's defense, obviously nothing to write home about, but again, I just think they're going to score at will against New Mexico. Last but not least, I checked the weather before I picked this. I was hoping for some crazy weather, but it didn't happen. So that being said, I'm going to take number 1 Oregon at Wisconsin minus 14.5. Again, Wisconsin's on their 3rd, 4th string quarterback. They're just really struggling to do anything offensively right now. It's going to be 55 and sunny in Madison the end of November, which is unheard of. Oregon dodges another bullet, but I think Oregon goes out there, takes care of business, locks up the 1 seed, and gets ready for the Big Ten championship game. And my super dog, number 4 Penn State at Purdue. Again, Purdue's not great. They do pull out one kind of crazy good game at home every year. I don't think Penn State's offense is clicking well enough to outscore anybody by 4 touchdowns right now. I think their defense will be locked down as normal, but I think Purdue steals me a couple super dog points on the back end. So those are my picks.
And I'll go second here, and I'll go quick. First one, I 100% agree with Bill. I told you guys earlier, I got Oregon minus 14.5 at Wisconsin for all of the same reasons. Nice weather. Oregon's offense is rolling. Wisconsin's got a quarterback carousel. It's pretty easy of a pick. Second pick, I like Nebraska plus 8.5 at USC. USC is still going through and figuring out their whole quarterback situation. Miller Moss will not be starting quarterback for this game, and I think that does matter. And I think Nebraska is going to go to USC and they're going to perform. Don't know if they win, but I think they keep it tight. Last game, I'm going to my darlings from last year. I like James Madison minus 2.5 at Old Dominion. James Madison's been consistently a good football team, and if you want to give me 2.5 points for a team I know they're better than, I'm going to take it every single time. So I like the Dukes there. And then for my super dog, I had San Diego State plus 20.5 at UNLV. San Diego State's a team that plays in a lot of tough games all year long, and I think this is going to be no different. I think UNLV will win the game, but I think San Diego State will be able to put up some points to keep that within 20.5.
All right. I may have heard me chuckle in there. It's because I heard a bunch of similar picks that I had, but again, I had like 15 picks, so I was eliminating my picks as you guys were going so that I could make up some ground this week on Pick'em. Here we go. I'll make it quick and simple. Syracuse plus 9.5 at Cal. I think Kyle McCord is going to wake up on the right side of the bed today. I think he's going to throw for 4 touchdowns, and that Cal offense is going to stutter a little bit. Syracuse plus 9.5. I actually think Syracuse wins this game outright. Next up, Oregon State going to Air Force. Oregon State is a minus 3 favorite. I think that they cover that pretty handily. I think this is the one game that they can fully control and take care of business to kind of help them get towards that bowl eligibility. So today I think they pick up win 5, and I think they take care of business by 10 points or more. Then we got Boise State, who we just spent a lot of time talking about, versus San Jose State. San Jose State is one of the best passing teams in the country, 5th, in fact, in the nation in passing yards. And they have one of the most unsung best receivers in the country as well, Nick Nash, over 1,100 receiving yards this year. Boise State is 14-point favorites. I think San Jose State, I think Boise State does win this game. I think San Jose State keeps it close. I think it's a one-possession game. So San Jose State plus 14. And for my super dog, I'm picking Boston College to go into SMU. SMU is 18.5 points favorites. And Boston College just lost their starting quarterback in Castellanos. He just kind of left for the transfer portal after being benched last week. But guess what? After he was benched last week, Boston College actually came back and made a game last week. It actually beat Syracuse 37-31. The quarterback that they had come in absolutely lit it up. What was his name? Something James. He was 5 for 6, only 51 yards. Kind of helped them drive late in the game and get that win. And they had over 200 rushing yards. I think Boston College is going to control the clock, eliminate possessions for SMU, and I think Boston College covers 18.5 for my super dog.
Excellent. Got like 2 minutes to go over Eliminator here. Alex, thank you so much for having Alabama throwing off LSU off the cliff. I do appreciate that. And for you, welcome. Bill, you have the LSU tombstone.
There it is. I've been waiting all year. LSU joins the graveyard. Iowa State as well. I mean, yeah, I don't really disagree with that. I don't think they have a way back in. We're the best part about this is to some degree this has held up a little bit better than I thought it was going to, in that there's teams that are still alive. The next couple weeks, that graveyard is going to get big, and it's going to get big quick. The guys that bury teams are going to be working overtime to get all these graves dug. So listen, we're coming down the stretch. To some degree, I'm kind of sad because I feel like this college football season is going so fast. I can't believe we're in our last month already, but we are about to get ready to start our first college football playoff of expanded, to 12 teams, extra games, extra playoff games on site at college on college grounds. That stuff's just gonna be awesome. So. We're getting down to the nitty gritty, but we're getting down to the good stuff too. So we got a solid, I'd say 2 months left.
Yeah,
a little over 2 months. So I think the championship game now is like toward the very end of January now. I think
it's like the 20th or something.
Yeah. So we got about 2 months left. So you're not getting rid of us quite yet, but
sorry,
but. It's crazy how fast it's going. So obviously these two guys are going to have more fun with it at the end of this year. But,
Bill, what are you talking about? We're going to be stressing. You have the fun part. Just being able to sit back, relax, and enjoy. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to enjoy it all.
Pressure burst pipes, bro. It's a luxury to have the pressure to go through. That's what I will tell you. So final thoughts, gentlemen. Let's finish up here. Kickoff was about 45 seconds away.
I got nothing this week. I'm just biding my time until get to see those Ducks again.
Hey, I'm just got my fingers crossed that Oregon's able to lock down that big appearance in the Big Ten Championship today against Wisconsin, and that everyone's able to come out uninjured. That's all I got to say.
Same.
All right.
That shit show at Wrigley is going to be a disaster. So same.
I can't wait to review that next week. We're going to talk so much crap about that game. I can't wait for all the bloopers, man. All right, let's get out of here.
All right, gentlemen. Enjoy kickoff. Everybody enjoy your days. Another great day of college football. And we will see you here next weekend. So we are signing off.